Masechet Nedarim Daf Mem Tet. We begin the sixth perek, which is all about food, vows about different words that have to do with food and types of cooking. And then from there, we're going to go into some stories and advice about what to eat and how to eat it. We begin. Hanoder min hamevushal mutar batzli ubashaluk. If someone makes a vow that they are not going to eat anything mivushal, literally cooked. Now we're going to see the word mivushal can have an expanded definition, meaning anything that's cooked in any way. But usually, mivushal means specifically something that is boiled, like a soup. Boiled in water. And so therefore, if I say I'm not going to have anything mivushal, I am permitted to have something that's barbecued, because that's not boiled at all, and shaluk. Now the word shaluk has many different opinions about what this means. I think the one that makes the most sense is something that is in fact roasted in a pot on the fire, but without a lot of water. So kind of like a pot roast. Is also, that would be roasting and not called boiled. So mivushal only means boiled. So that would be a very limited definition. That's how most people use it. We're going to see in general regarding Nedarim, you follow the most common definition in the area where you live. So this is not the biblical definition or the dictionary definition. It's how common people understand it wherever you are. אמר כונם תבשיל שאיני תואם אסור במעשה קדרה רך ומותר בעבה ומותר בביצה תורמותה ובדלת הרמוסה. If someone says, well, this is prohibited like a korban to me, tavshil, any cooked item that I will eat. So it's a little bit different from hamivushal, which is going to be very limited. The word tavshil is going to be more expanded, which means it's going to prohibit more things. And if he says that I'm not going to taste anything that is tavshil, then he cannot have anything that's cooked in a pot that is soft and mushy or kind of runny. So this would prohibit something like cream of wheat, porridge, maybe shakshuka, something that is very soft that normally you'd have to eat with bread, because otherwise it would be too runny. Mutar be'aveh, but he'll be permitted to eat something that is thick or solid that you don't eat with bread, you eat it by itself. That is not included in tavshil. And also that person can eat an egg that's prepared in a specific way. It's cooked 1,000 times. We're going to see that definition on the daf tomorrow. And this gourd, a special kind of gourd, that also we'll explain in a couple of dapim. So these are unconsidered hard items and are eaten by themselves, not with bread. So all these things are permitted. And so there we go. We have the first half of the Mishnah is contrasting mivushal with tavshil. Mivushal means very specifically only something boiled, and tavshil means anything that is cooked in a pot, but that's runny. Okay, the second half is going to also make now a distinction between kedera and hayored likdera. So hanoder mimase kedera en asur ela mimase retachta. Someone says, I'm not going to eat anything that is prepared in a pot or a dish. So then that he would only be prohibited from something that is boiled. Okay, so this is a more specific definition, and therefore it's only going to apply to something actually boiled in a pot. Amar kunam hayored laktera sheni to'em asur b'chol hamitbashlim b'kedera. But if he says, prohibited to me is anything that goes into a pot and that I will not eat, in that case he's prohibited from eating anything that goes into a pot, even if it's not boiled, but just cooked in a pot in some other way. Or in a dish in some other way, that would also be prohibited. So that's the structure of the Mishnah. It has two halves, and each half is contrasting two similar words. The first word being more particular, and therefore would allow more things, and the second word being more expansive, more general, and therefore would cover a wider range of prohibition. All right, so now regarding the first item, Tanya Rabbi Yoshia Oser. Rabbi Yoshia in this Baraita, disagrees with the Mishnah, which he can do. He's a Tana, and he says that when someone says mivushal, it means any cooked item. It's the more general definition, like in English, we just say cooked, and that means cooked in any way. Even if it's barbecued. And even though there's no proof, absolute proof, that the word mivushal covers even all kinds of cooking, even barbecue, but there is a hint to this in the Tanakh, in Divrei Yamim, which describes the cooking of the Korban Pesach during the times of the first Bet HaMikdash, and it says, but they cooked the Pesach in fire. What you see here is that although they're roasting the Korban Pesach over an open flame, they're barbecuing it, nevertheless it calls that Vayvashelu. So the word mivushal in fact does cover barbecuing as well. This is actually a very important pasuk, because what this pasuk is doing is it's reconciling two pasukim, one in Shemot and one in Devarim. In Shemot it says that you have to prepare Korban Pesach seli esh, and it says specifically there, and not mevushal b'mayim. Whereas in Sefer Devarim it says ubishalta, that you prepare it, and if you just had Devarim by itself, one would assume that ubishalta means that you can boil the Korban Pesach. So it seems to be a contradiction. Which one is it? Shemot says ba'esh, and Devarim says levashel, which by itself normally means to boil, as we just said here, and that's the language that would mean in a vow. So the Divrei Yamim is putting the two Pesukim together, taking one word from Devarim, one word from Shemot, putting it all together to teach us that the word levashel can also include to cook over fire, and that reconciles Devarim with Shemot. And so this is a hint to Rabbi Yoshia's opinion that mivushal covers all ways of cooking. Lema behaka mipalged. Rabbi Yoshia sabar halech achal leshon Torah, v'tana dilan sabar ben darim halech achal leshon bnei adam. So what's at the root of the machloket between our Mishnah and Rabbi Yoshia? Let's propose that Rabbi Yoshia thinks that whenever someone is making a vow, you follow the language as defined in the Torah. Go look at a biblical dictionary, see how the usage in biblical times, that's the official Hebrew, and that's what the word means. Whereas the author of our Mishnah says, no, we follow the language of Bnei Adam, the way people usually speak, in whatever time and place that you're in, and words do change their meaning over time, and sometimes have different meanings in different places, and so it goes by the local meaning. And so that would apply to the Mishnah, our Mishnah, where most people, when they say mevushal, they mean only boiled, but in the Tanakh, that's Rabbi Yoshia's following Tanakh, where it means even if it's roasted. Right? So is that a good conclusion? And we say, La dekula amar b'tem halecha achal leshon b'nei adam. No, don't necessarily pigeonhole, especially Rabbi Yoshia, because in general we don't follow Lashon Torah. Vows, it makes sense you should follow the way people normally speak, because vow is something that a person is making, is language that a person is making up. And so if they're saying something, most people, when they talk, they're not using biblical language, they're using their everyday language. And so we should follow Lashon Bnei Adam. And so how can we explain this machloket within, saying that Nedarim follow the way people normally speak? Mor kiatre. Each person was following his own place where they lived. Beatre detana dilan, lesali karu lesali, mushar karu mevushal. Our Tana of our Mishnah lived in a place where if something is roasted, they called it roasted. If something is boiled, they called it boiled. They call mevushal. Mevushal only means boiled. But where Rabbi Yoshia lived, they even if something was roasted, they would call it mevushal. Mevushal had a more expansive definition in his place, but they're both following the normal human usage. Hold on, but Rabbi Yoshia does cite a pasuk. So if he's citing a pasuk, doesn't that mean that he thinks we should follow the lashon of the Torah, meaning the lashon of the Tanakh? And then we say, no, asmachta be'alma. No, he was just bringing a support for his opinion. In fact, he says, it's not a re'ayah, just a zecher ladavar. Says, look, the way we use The word in my town is that mevushal covers everything, and it's not just us. See, even in Divrei Yamim, it uses mevushal as a general term for any type of cooking. But this was only to bring support, a mnemonic device. It was not actually saying the halacha would be if you're in a place where they don't use the term that way, then it would not cover roasted items. Good. Kunam tabshil, the Mishnah said, if someone says that a tavshil, and he uses that word, is prohibited to me, then that would cover only loose, runny food, but not solid foods or thick foods. But now we ask, Veha mit tavshil nadad. He said a tavshil is no good, so why should that not include something thick? If you have like a thick stew, so isn't that also tavshil? Isn't it cooked in a pot? Well, so that should also be prohibited. Why would it be permitted? Amar Abaye, hay Tana, kol mideh demitakel mitachel berifta, tavshil karu leo. So Abaye explains that according to this Tana, if you eat it with bread, that's called tavshil. That's the normal language. Very often they would eat, they would have some kind of a dip or runny dish, some kind of sauce, and they would be dipping bread in it. And so that's called tavshil. That's a kind of a normal meal, bread with tavshil. And if it's something hard or thick and it's not eaten with bread, they didn't use the term tavshil to refer to that. That's why. Okay, and we have a proof for this. V'hatanya. This is a kind of a hatanya. That's not a question, but rather support from this baraita. הנוטה מן התבשיל אסור בכל מיני תבשיל ואסור בסליב בשלוק ומבושל ואסור בהטריות רכות שהחולין אוכלין בהן פיתן. So if someone says that tavshil is prohibited to me, well, according to this baraita, that would include any type of cooked food, no matter if it's roasted or pot roasted or boiled. And he's prohibited from eating something soft that sick people eat with bread. In other words, according to this baraita, the word tavshil covers soft, runny food that you eat with bread. And here's a proof that the word tavshil means what you eat with bread, and that's exactly what Abaye said. Okay, now that we mentioned these sick people, we're going to go into that. But that in a minute. Okay. Ini v'had b'Yirmiyah halash al legabe hahu asya le'asyu. Hold on, we have a question because Yirmiyah, when he was sick, a doctor came to heal him. Chazak kara demachat bebeteh shebake unfak. He saw a gourd in the house and he left. Amar malach mota it le leden bebeteh. Ve'ana eola sa'ah yateh. He says the angel of death is here because he saw the gourd, and you think I'm going to enter it? So this is a question because right above in this baraita, it says if someone eats this soft gourd, right, it's the hitriot, rakot, that you eat with bread, that sick people eat with bread. That was the example. So this would mean that sick people eating soft gourd is good for them. Whereas here, this doctor of Yirmiyah, when he saw that they had gourd and means the sick person must have eaten this gourd, he says, forget it, there's no chance. I'm not even going to try to heal this guy. This is the angel of death because it's bad for you to eat gourd. So we have a contradiction. We're going to see two ways to solve it. La kashya ha berakiche ha be'ashune. It depends. If it's a soft gourd, then it's good for you. If it's a hard gourd, then it's no good for you. Seems to be talking about two different species of gourds. Rava bar Ula amar ha bekara gufe v'ha begaveh dekara. Or another answer, the gourd itself is not good for you, but the inside of the whole gourd is not good, but the inside, the soft part of the gourd, that is good for you. Damarav Yehuda, luliva dekara besilka, luliva dechitana bechuchta. As Rav Yehuda gave advice, he said the inner part of a gourd should be eaten with chard, like meaning Swiss chard, right? Like we eat on Rosh Hashanah, these leaves. You should eat them together, and the inside of flax seeds you should eat with kutach. Kutach is the very moldy yogurt fancy dish that they had in Bavel. I don't know how fancy it was, but it was a very, very sharp tasting dish. that was very fermented. Okay, so it's good to have this with the flax seeds in it. And so we see here is that luliva. Luliva, it might come from the word lev, like the inside part. Like we say, artichoke hearts is the soft, edible part of the artichoke. That's good. The rest of the artichoke you're not going to eat. And so the inner part that's soft is good, right? So that's a proof to what Rava said. But by the way, you should not mention this item to ignorant people, because if they hear that it's good to have flax seeds with your kutach, then they're going to go and tear up all the flax plants. So to go get its seed, they're going to ruin all the flax plants. So therefore, do not tell this to ignoramuses who are going to misuse this information. Good. Rava Amar, Man Cholin Rabbanan. Now, when we say Cholin here, right, that the soft gourd is good for sick people, Rava explains that we're not talking about people that are actually have a disease, but rather we're talking about sages, rabbis, because they're learning Torah all the time. They're not getting enough physical activity. They're not indulging in worldly pleasures like that would keep them healthy. And so they're so focused on the Torah studies that they become weak and sickly because of it. Rava l'tamed amar Rava, and we see Rava says this elsewhere. Keman misalinan al kisire v'al miri'eh, keman kerebi yoseh. If according to whose opinion do we pray every day for the sick and suffering? And according to the opinion of Rabbi Yoseh. This relates to a machloket in Masechet Rosh Hashanah about when are human beings judged. Some say only on Rosh Hashanah for the whole year. That's why I just pray on Rosh Hashanah. But other people say no, each and every day a person is judged, and that's Rabbi Yoseh. So that's why every day we pray for the sick and suffering, because people are actually judged every day. Why do you use two terms, the sick and the suffering? Why not just say the sick? It's the same thing. So he's sick. So the word kitzireh, sick, that means people who actually have a disease. Whereas suffering, that refers to sages who are weak from in concentrating so much on their Torah study, kind of their minds and spiritual activity gets all the focus, and their bodies wither away. And so they have to take special care of their bodies with eating that soft gourd. Okay. Umutar be'aveh. Now, when you make such a vow, you only, of tafshil, you can still have thick food, because that's not called tafshil. Matnitin de la kebab la'eh. This Mishnah does not follow the custom of the Babylonians. This is only in Eretz Yisrael. That's where a typical tafshil, you say a cooked dish, you mean something that you eat with bread. And they don't do that in Bavel. In Bavel, they eat bread with everything. Even with thick things. And so that's why the Bizera, who happened to go from Bavel and move to Eretz Yisrael, he calls the Babylonians foolish because they eat bread with bread. What he means is that even if you have something thick, like a thick porridge that normally you just eat by yourself because it's so thick, in Eretz Yisrael, they would eat it alone. But they take this porridge, which might be made out of wheat. It's made out of wheat, and they would put it on wheat bread. And so they'd make a bread sandwich with bread on the outside and something that's made out of wheat and very thick on the inside. And that doesn't make any sense, how they do that in Bavel. But what you do see from here is that in Bavel, they don't distinguish between thick and thin cooked items. They eat everything with bread. Amar Rav Chisda de mash'il lehon lehalan nakta'eh dehusal. Rav Chisda said, so we're going to see a couple of stories about people that actually lived in Bavel and how they ate. So Rav Chisda said, we asked these people who were very careful about how they ate. They were very particular in their politeness and in their manners, and they lived in Hutzal in Bavel. Hadin daisa hechin ma'aleh lemechla. When you eat porridge, what's the proper way to eat it? Dechite belachma dechite udasa'areh belachma desa'areh. On the one hand, if it's made out of wheat porridge, do you eat it with wheat bread? And then if it's barley porridge, you eat it with barley bread? Should you match? the bread with the type of grain of the porridge, or maybe you should mix and match. And if it's wheat porridge, eat it with barley bread, and barley porridge, eat it with wheat bread, so that you get a mixture of different types of grains. So I don't know, we don't have an answer from the sages of Hutzal, but Rava does say, we do say that Rava would eat his bread with chasiseh, which is made out of wheat. So it sounds like he would eat wheat with wheat, so eat the same type. Now we have more stories about eating manners. Rabba bar Rav Huna ashkachel Rav Huna de ka'achil daisa be'es be'ateh. So Rabba, son of Rav Huna, found Rav Huna, maybe that's his father, maybe it's just someone else named Rav Huna. Anyway, this Rav Huna was eating porridge with his fingers, like they do in India. This is why are you eating with your fingers? Usually you scoop something up with a piece of bread or utensil. Amar le hachi amarav daisa be'esbe'ate besim v'chol dechen betarten v'chol dechen bitelat. It was because Rav, the great first generation Amora in Bavel, said that porridge is tastier with one finger, and it's even better with two fingers, and all the more so 3 fingers. Maybe the idea is that part of the experience is not just tasting the food, but also feeling it. And it increases the enjoyment and experience by using more senses to eat the food. Amar le Rav lechia bere, v'chen amar le Rav Huna le Rabba bere. Mezamenin lach lemechal daisa ad parsa, lemechal bisra de Torah ad telata parsin. So advice that Rav said to his son, or Rav Huna also said to his son, is that if someone invites you to have some porridge, you should travel up to 1 parsa. That's a Persian parsang, which is a little less than 3 miles. Right, it's worth the trip to have some porridge. It's very good for you. But if someone serves you ox meat, invites you for ox meat, you should travel 3 parsangs, because that's even better. Ox meat, we saw, is very hard to cook. You have to cook it for a long time, but well worth it. Worth the trip. And now we're going to see something a bit contradictory to that. Amar le Rav lechia bere, v'chen amar le Rav Huna le Rabba bere. And so here Rav Chia tells his son, and similarly Rav Huna tells his son, so which is the same people telling their son something. Kol midam la tiflot kamei rabbecha lebar min kara v'daisa she'en domin liftilta shel abar v'afilu kamei shavor malka pelot. And they said, don't spit anything out in front of your teacher. It's not nice. It's disrespectful to, if you're eating something and it's not good, to spit it out. Except for 2 things. Except for porridge and gourd. All right, kara porridge, gourd, and daisa porridge, because these things are like a burning lead wick. This is the way that they would give execution to someone who's deserving of burning. And we don't actually burn the whole body in a fire, because that would desecrate the body. Instead, they're burnt from inside. So it says these foods, if they're not good and can be very harmful to you, and therefore you should spit them out, not only in front of your teacher, even if you're sitting in front of King Shapur, the king of the Persian Empire. Better to be embarrassed and be disrespectful and spit it out, because otherwise it will be very damaging to your health. Okay, so on the one hand, they do say that the porridge is not quite as good as ox meat, right? Ox meat, you go very far. For porridge, you don't go that far for it, so it's not already there. It's not the greatest thing. And perhaps if it's not prepared well, or if it's too hot, or something not good, and you're kind of choking on it, then best to spit it out, because otherwise it will be very bad for you. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Chad achel daisa be'esba'ateh v'chad achel behutza. And now more about eating with your hands. We had Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Yehuda. One of them was eating with his fingers, and one of them was eating with some kind of utensil, a fork or a piece of bark. So the one who was eating with a fork told the one, we don't know which one is which, told the one who was eating with his fingers, until how long are you going to keep feeding me your your waste, your filth. So apparently they're eating from the same dish. That would be common. You'd have one big dish in the middle of things that you dip, and then everybody would be dipping into it and eating. So if you're dipping bread, that would be the most common thing, and that's fine, because every time you dip the bread, you take a bite, and now you're getting another piece of bread or the rest of the bread, and so there's no double dipping. But here, this one is sticking his fingers in it, and his fingers are all dirty, and he keeps sticking his fingers again and again in this, and so the one who's using a fork, nice and proper, this is disgusting. How long are you gonna keep putting your waste back in to the dish? And the other one had to come back, the one who was eating with his fingers, to the one who was eating with this utensil. How long are you going to keep feeding me your spit? In other words, at least when I'm using my fingers, but you clean your fingers off between every bite or so, and you clean it on the napkin. But when you're using this utensil and you don't clean it, so every time you eat something, then your spit is going on it, and then you're putting it back in, so you're the one that's actually more disgusting than me. All right. Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Shimon aytu lekamayu belos payin. Rabbi Yehuda achal, Rabbi Shimon lo achal. So these two say Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon they brought in front of them these types of figs, belos payin figs. Rabbi Yehuda ate them, and Rabbi Shimon refused to eat them. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, my tamar la'achil mo. Rabbi Yehuda tells Rabbi Shimon, how come you're not eating these nice figs? Amar Rabbi Shimon, elu en yosin mibnei me'ayim kol ikar. Rabbi Shimon says, no, I won't go near them, because they do not come out of your intestines at all. This causes constipation. I'm not going to eat them. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, kol sheken shenismoch alen machar. Rabbi Yehuda says, that makes them even better. That way I'll feel full tomorrow too. So you get two meals for the price of one. So one liked that, and one did not want to have that. Rabbi Yehuda Hava Yateb Kamed Rabbi Tarfon. This same Rabbi Yehuda who ate those figs, he was once sitting before Rabbi Tarfon, his teacher. Amar Rabbi Tarfon, Hayom panecha sehubin. Rabbi Tarfon noticed that Rabbi Yehuda, you look nice and rosy, ruddy today, healthy. Amar le'emesh yasu abadecha lesadeh biu lanu teradin v'chanum belo melach. This is all because yesterday we went to the field and they brought us some beets, and we ate the beets without any salt. And if we had salt around and we ate them with salt, we would have been even more ruddy. So the beets, I guess they're nice red beets, and that gave them nice color and made them healthy. Now this same Rabbi Yehuda, who was ready from the beets, there was a certain noblewoman who saw him and said, you teach and you drink. Because she saw that he had these red cheeks, she thought that he was red from drinking a lot of alcohol. So she asked him, how could you teach and drink? Right, now we don't drink and drive, but in those days, right, you don't teach and you don't drink and teach. That would be dangerous. You're going to teach all kinds of wrong things. How could you do that? Amar la hemanuta bidadahi tetai taimna ela kidusha ve'ibdalta v'arba'a kaseh de pischa. And she says, my integrity is in your hands, right? You have it. You have my word that I do not drink anything except any alcohol, except for kiddush, havdalah, and 4 cups of wine on Pesach. That's the absolute minimum, because you have to have wine for those at those times. But that's it. Ve'chogarani sid'ai mina pesach v'adaseret. When I have those 4 cups of wine, I get such a headache from it that I have to tie my temples, my head, from Pesach to Shavuot. Right? It takes me 49 days to recover from that hangover headache. Me and wine don't mix. Ela chokhmat adam ta'ir panav. And therefore you should know, I did not drink anything. My face is not red from drinking, but rather, the pasuk says, a man's wisdom makes his face shine. My redness is from Torah. It's interesting that he says it's from Torah to this noblewoman, whereas to his teacher he says because of beets. And so, well, maybe a combination of both. But for each one, he wanted to emphasize to the one or the other, because Rabbi Tarfon and other sages were also learning a lot of Torah. So what makes him redder than them? It's the beets. But for this noblewoman who was challenging his teaching ability, because he was so red. He says, no, it's precisely my wisdom that makes me red and shine, so that she would appreciate what he valued. Amar le'ahu mina l'Rabbi Yehuda. And now this wise guy is challenging Rabbi Yehuda, this heretic. He says, Panecha domim I kemalveri bit I kim gaddele hazirin. And he tells Rabbi Yehuda, your face looks like those who take interest, lend on interest, and those who raise pigs. Both of these are good businesses, good in the sense that they're very profitable without so much work. And so people that lend on interest and raise pigs are wealthy and pampered, and they sit and they eat and drink a lot, and that's why they look ruddy and look very healthy. So this is, you look like you're pampered, like you must have one of these professions. Isn't that right? מעלה ביהודה תרוויהו אסירן אלא 24 בית הכיסא איתלי מן ביתה ועד במדרשה וכל שעה אני נכנס לכל אחד ואחד. He says, no, sorry, regarding the Jews, we are prohibited from both of them. We can't charge interest, and we also are not allowed to raise pigs. But I'll tell you why I'm so healthy, because there are 24 bathrooms on my way from my house to the Bet Midrash, and I go into each and every one on my way. And that way, I never suffer from constipation. I always relieve myself. And that's a very healthy thing to do, and that's why I look so healthy. All right, good advice. Rabbi Yehuda kad azil lebe midrasha shakil gulfa al katfe. So more stories about Rabbi Yehuda, who, when he went to the study house, he would carry a pitcher on his shoulder. So even though someone who's a dignified person shouldn't be carrying a burden through in the street, that's menial labor. But he says great is labor because it gives honor to the laborer. In what way does this give honor? So it seems that he's taking this pitcher to the Bet Midrash so he could sit on it. He doesn't have to sit on the floor, and so it's worth the labor of carrying your own stool to the Bet Midrash so that you have a nice little chair to sit on and don't have to sit on the floor. Okay. Rabbi Shimon Shakil Sana al Katfe Amar Gedola Melacha Shemechabedet et Be'aleha. Rabbi Shimon similarly would carry a basket on the shoulder and said the same thing, that labor is great because it brings honor to the one that's doing it. And so, don't be embarrassed to be seen walking in the street carrying a chair. In the end, you'll be more feel more respect that you can sit properly. Debitu de Rabbi Yehuda nefakt naktat amra abda gelima de hutebe. So Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to see he lived in very modestly. And his wife went and she collected wool and made a nice thick cloak. Probably wasn't a very expensive item because she just made it from leftover wool that she was able to find, and she made this cloak. When she would go out to the market, she would cover herself with it so that she would be warm and modest. Rabbi Yehuda would go to pray. He would cover this. He would use it to cover himself and pray. So they kind of shared a coat. And he was so gratified that he had this nice thick wool coat that when they put it on, he would say a special baracha, right? Thank you, Hashem, who wraps me in a coat. Okay, wonderful. Zimna chada chagazar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel ta'anita. One time, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who's a nasi, he said, a public fast day, maybe there was no rain. Rabbi Yehuda la'ata lebet ta'anita, but Rabbi Yehuda did not come to Rabban Rashbag to pray with him. Amrin le la'it le kisuya. He's wondering, where's Rabbi Yehuda? How come he didn't come? He says he doesn't have a coat to wear. And so he's embarrassed to come, not dressed properly. He's very wealthy. He sent him a cloak, but Rabbi Yehuda would not accept it. Deli sifta ve'amar le lishlocha chazi mai'ika mihu lanicha li de'itane behaden alma. So Rabbi Yehuda showed why he didn't accept this coat. He lifted a mat. He showed to the messenger who was sending him the coat. He says, look what I have. And he showed that there's a gold dinars right under his in the stool that he's sitting on, full of gold. He says, I could buy it if I want. That's not an issue of the money, but rather I do not want to derive benefit from this world. I'm purposely living in a very modest way because I don't want to be materialistic, and I don't even want to have any benefit from this world to take away from my spiritual attention, and so therefore I'm refusing the coat. And so this is a great and important lesson, that he's purposely not rich. He actually is rich. He could get money anytime he wants, but he's purposely living in a very humble way. Okay, what happened to the coat that he had over here? How come he didn't wear that? Well, a couple of possibilities. Maybe his wife was wearing it, so because she was out to the marketplace and at the same time that they were praying. So you see, they both share one cloak, so only one can go out at a time. Or maybe this cloak, even though he loved it and got a lot of pleasure in it, was actually very simple, drab cloak, and so he was embarrassed to show up at the prestigious home of Rashbag, if they were praying in his home, where everybody is dressed properly, and he's not dressed in that way. He didn't want to show disrespect in that way, and so maybe that's why he didn't come. Or maybe the stories are out of order, but it actually looks like the stories are in order. Zimna Chada, this is kind of a follow-up to the previous one, showing that he did a lot with a little and appreciated whatever he had, which is a wonderful lesson to always be happy with what we have. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.